This is America, and this is the White House, where reporters like myself are contending with an ever unpredictable president. Donald Trump has defied customary relations with the press and the public. He's transformed his self and his social media platform into the messenger, bypassing traditional media that he labels as fake news. In a moment, we'll have more on how Donald Trump roots his political power in his control over the media. But first, here's Rob Matheson with more in our Washington, D.C. studio.
Thanks, Kimberly. A blizzard of bombast, a sweep through sound bites, and a head-spinning switch from entertainment to geopolitics. Even critics of Donald Trump acknowledge that he does have a mastery of talking directly to his core voters. Simple, direct, repetitive. It means the news media hangs onto his every word, covering hours of speeches or press conferences, just in case something important slips through. But having a president speaking from the hip is risky. It can rock financial markets, or it can derail delicate diplomacy. Key policy announcements made in moments like these. Incomprehensible, impromptu press events drowned out by the sound of Marine One.
Are you willing to cancel the Will China invest $1 trillion in the U.S.?
We're going to be giving a letter supposedly tonight, so we'll see how that goes. I don't think about American financial situation. I don't know. Well, we had a good meeting. That's the only thing that
Do you think they're rolling it? Do you think they're intentionally slow rolling the process?
We'll find out soon enough.
Well, Donald Trump's second term in the White House has marked the return of a presidency built around spectacle, immediacy, and constant communication. From unexpected exchanges with reporters to late-night Truth Social posts, Trump has transformed the presidency into a rolling live production. As our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett reports, it's one that often bypasses traditional media.
Very disjointed, unfriendly.
Loud, unscripted exchanges with reporters. Donald Trump's transformed his routine departures on Marine One into live media events.
I doubled the size of it, you dumb person. Thank you.
The president's plane, also the site of impromptu press conferences, with Trump batting down questions he doesn't like. At the center of Donald Trump's media strategy, Trump himself. It's a departure from the traditionally cautious relationship between presidents and the media. But Donald Trump's recognized as his own best messenger, preferring to communicate directly on his social media platform, unfiltered.
When you see it on Truth Social, you know it's directly from President Trump. That's the beauty of this president and his transparency and relaying this administration's policies to all of you and to the rest of the world.
Direct communication comes at a cost. Reporters must constantly monitor live events, social media, and evolving White House schedules. Journalists like Caitlin Dornbos even have Trump's phone number, providing unprecedented, albeit exhausting, accessibility.
Because, of course, I'm used to calling the president for comment on stories of the day. That's my job. But I wasn't expecting to get a phone call on my phone from the president. That was a really unique experience. And I think it says a lot about how he cares about the reporting that I was doing, about his relationship with the press.
Donald Trump's political power stems from his instinctive understanding of the media and live television. Media moments are highly visual political theater designed for instant transmission across the globe. Using rally appearances, simple messaging, and slogans, Trump mobilizes his base through verbal attacks.
Let me just tell you, you are an obnoxious, actually a terrible reporter.
Even policy announcements are rolled out like a salesman pitching a brand. That includes Trump's new White House ballroom with a show and tell, televised to promote its construction.
This is all my money and donors' money. This is tax-free.
Supporters call Donald Trump's communication transparency. Critics call it performance politics, because Donald Trump doesn't just respond to the news cycle, he creates it. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, the White House.
Well, Patty Culhane-Lifer is at the White House. Patty, you've covered the White House under a number of presidents. How are the tactics of this administration different from those that you've come across before?
Two presidents, George H.W. Bush and Barack Obama, and this one is completely different. I was actually taken back. I haven't been here in a while. It's a lot more crowded with media. It used to be, back in the day, that you would ask for a hard pass for the White House. That basically gave you unlimited access. You'd be able to swipe in and out of the White House after a very thorough security background check. Those are really hard to come by. They really only went to mainstream media with large audiences. There are a ton more reporters now, and I'm going to show you a little bit behind the scenes of this very glamorous location. There's about more than a dozen of these tents. This is where the television media has been this entire time. That's now expanded. It used to be cameras could only be here. Now they're all over the lawn. And so they've also allowed in more right-wing media. That's why you hear often when the presidents ask questions in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room, very complimentary questions. That has never happened before. And you're seeing more right-wing media in the briefing room. It used to be that reporters basically controlled the briefing, how long it went. And now this press secretary, she usually, when she's doing regular briefings, will call on someone that they've hand-selected to be brought into the briefing room, usually a very sympathetic voice. So that's one big difference. Another one is the lid. So you might be asking yourself, what's the lid? Well, White House officials, when they said the president's all done for the evening, you're not going to hear from them, you're not going to see them, they call a lid. Basically, that means everyone can go home, have dinner, put your phone down. But that doesn't really apply now because the president is on social media so often. So as I can tell you from being here for the first time in a long time, it is a very different place.
Patty Culhane of the White House, thank you very much indeed. I want to bring in our guests. We're joined now by Mark Fifley. He's a former Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications and Global Outreach at the White House, and by Eric Ham, political analyst and former congressional staffer. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being with us on Al Jazeera. Mark, I want to ask you first, given that you have your background in strategic communications and so on, let's talk about the posts first of all. For those of us who perhaps are watching this from around the world who don't quite understand how this works, how much of this is a stream of consciousness and how much of it is a strategy?
Both. So Trump treats communications and media as a weapon, just as the military has weapons, as the Treasury Department has weapons when it comes to sanctions. This is his weapon. And his gun is Truth Social, and his ability, the reporters have his cell phone number and they call him and they get immediate access. It makes it very difficult for people such as the correspondent who cover the White House because you just don't know. You can't take time off. There's no such thing because you don't know when he's going to put up his social media or he's going to have that kind of a response. For example, when I was in Doha for the first weeks of the war at Al Jazeera, he would call 6 reporters a day and have 6 different stories moving through the media. And for operators on the ground, diplomats trying to figure out what's going on, military people trying to keep in contact with the headquarters and figure out what is their strategy, it makes it really, really difficult.
Eric, how much of this is down to what could be a unique set of circumstances in that we have the advance of technology, we have social media, now we have Trump's personality himself. We also have a president who understands the power of the media and the power of social media and the broader political culture as a whole.
Well, as Mark said, the president uses the media strategy as a weapon. He has weaponized all of it. And when we talk about social media and he talks about Truth Social, that has become his primary tool, his vehicle by which to weaponize many of his words and what he is saying. And because he is the president of the United States, he is seen as the most powerful person in the free world. He recognizes that power and he uses it in a way that most presidents, not even Richard Nixon, were prepared to do. There were always norms. There was always lines that presidents operated within, boundaries that they kept as checks on their own power, not only on their power in terms of what they do policy-wise, but also in how they communicate both with the American people and beyond. And what we're seeing with President Donald Trump, those boundaries, those checks simply are not there. As we continue to hear over and over from the president, I'm the president of the United States, I can do what I want. And he says that and he recognizes that. And because We know that even Congress has become so enfeebled and are willing to do his bidding. He sees himself as not just the president of the United States, but that all levers of power actually run through him. And so he's using this ability to communicate and propagandize his message through all of these levers of power, because there simply are no checks. And he recognizes no one is going to stop me from being able to do that. And that's what makes him so much more potent and so much more powerful than any president that we've seen before.
Mark, we're talking predominantly about his relationship with the media. He has repeatedly called mainstream media fake news. Just for clarification, when he's talking about that, is it that he does not trust the media, or is it that he simply doesn't like what they say about him?
He loves the media. He is the media in many ways, but he plays the sides. He's like a referee. He's trying to play both sides of the system. So he's trying to play one reporter after another, one media organization after another, try and game the coverage that comes out. Ultimately, he does not really like the gatekeeping aspect of it, meaning the way that it's portrayed, the way the sound bites are cut up. He would say that he's misrepresented, and I think that's part of the challenge that people have. But he treats media the way that a military war planner would treat terrain. You know, he sees it as a strategic war that he's at with the press and with the media every day, and that has some advantages. For example, is that in Iran, it throws theoretically the enemy off of its game, because they are more structured. They have a chain of command. They don't know where the supreme leader is right now. Carriers have to take information back and forth. There's been killing of many of the layers of it. So in some ways, Trump has an advantage at that. But at the same time, when you're trying to communicate a general strategy to the American public, to your Gulf allies and others, it makes it really difficult because you don't have a sub-team of people. When I was at the White House, we would have multiple surrogates. We would want ambassadors talking. We would want soldiers in the field talking. We would want senior commanders doing briefings all the time. It's difficult because they don't know what to say, because they're not reading Truth Social every day to find out what is our message. I don't want to say something wrong with what the commander-in-chief is going to say. So when we were at the White House during the Iraq surge, the challenge was that a lot of the senior leaders did not have credibility because we'd been in Iraq for 3 or 4 years at that point. So we had to have people on the ground, commanders, David Petraeus, the commander of the multinational force Iraq, Ryan Crocker, the ambassador to Iraq, and then down the line of people telling the stories of what was going on. And then the other thing that Mr. Trump did and his administration did was they took out a lot of the capabilities of the government to communicate. Things like the Voice of America and other things were defunded with this Doge, with Elon Musk. So that takes away the ability to communicate to the region in various ethnicities and languages that we would have had before. Not that you're going to reach the Iranians, because for the most part, their internet has been taken down, but to teach some people in the region what America's doing, why they're doing it, what the strategy is, that's a real question that people have right now. So strategic ambiguity, trying to throw the enemy off of its game, but at the same time, it makes it very difficult to figure out America's strategy at the same time.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the volume of stuff that we're talking about, because it really is the scale as much as anything else that we're trying to deal with. And there's an element of trying to find out how much Donald Trump does actually post in a day. And our correspondent, Alex Baird, has made it his mission to try to find out. Here's his report.
Let's take a look at a day in the life of the president. How about Memorial Day on Monday? While many here were taking a day off, Donald Trump was already on socials from the White House at 6:10 a.m. A long post about his negotiations with Iran and the so-called Democrats and rhinos, or Republicans in name only. 8 minutes later, a happy Memorial Day, including to the Democrats, and another 8 minutes later, more jabs at the Dems. For the next 2 hours, the president put out 8 more posts. Legal documents about the White House ballroom, reposts, and a thank you to Fox News. By 8:23, he landed on this, a scrawling post pressuring Gulf leaders to normalize relations with Israel. For the next few hours, the president is quiet. still at the White House ahead of Memorial Day duties at Arlington National Cemetery. Then a sudden flurry of memes, most of them taking aim at Obama and Biden, and all just 20 minutes before jumping into the official motorcade to head to Arlington. The next 2 hours, Trump focuses on his Memorial Day duties, remembering fallen service members and speaking to the country. Then back in the car, before he even reaches the White House, it's back on Truth Social for a post on his tariff policies. Then we have another 4 hours of silence. The president back to the White House with an Oval Office policy meeting. But as day becomes night, it's back to full force on Truth Social. This time, we're talking uranium, India relations, Memorial Day pics, a post on the Save America Act, an image comparing the Lincoln reflection pool to skyscrapers, some happy days, Obama jabs, and now it's past 10. And another Biden jab. Finally, one last post for the evening at 10:14. And that was the day. 26 posts, 8 different topics over 16 hours on a federal holiday. That's a lot, but for the president, that was a comparatively quiet day. His personal record is 200.
Eric, an illustration there of just that was an average day, and he covered so many different topics, which, as we're discussing, makes it difficult not only for journalists but for the public as well to try to get a sense of what is important and what isn't. But in your estimation, how do you think news organizations are having to reassess the way that they approach the White House, and is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, as someone who works in the media and who gets those phone calls in the middle of the night because President Donald Trump has posted something so outlandish, so outrageous, I think this is part of the cycle of covering this president. During the Biden administration, it was very calm in comparison to what we saw or what we're seeing from President Donald Trump. In addition to that, we have to remember, President Donald Trump came into office. He came down that gilded escalator as someone who was at war with the establishment. He was at war with politics. He was at war with the country. And also there was a civil war that was taking place in the Republican Party that had begun under Mitt Romney, after Mitt Romney's loss to Barack Obama during Barack Obama's second term. And so I think what we're seeing here is President Donald Trump is simply continuing with that theme of being at war with everyone. He's at war with the media. And while he certainly wants the adoration from the media, from the country, and from the world, what he recognizes also is this is the fuel that got him to where he is. And so he has to continue that. And I think what we're going to continue to see throughout his presidency is a president who is continuing to fight. He will fight with allies. He will fight with enemies. He will fight with people within his own party. And so the question becomes, does this eventually take a toll on the president? We are seeing, in fact, that it is, given how unpopular the war in Iran is for the president right now. And also what we're seeing in terms of the brewing battle within his own party now that he has worked to unseat a number of incumbents. So clearly, Donald Trump is constantly at war, and we're seeing the impact that it's having, not only on the nation, not only in the world, but more importantly, on the presidency as the institution itself, but also on Donald Trump in terms of just the cratering approval ratings.
Yeah, Mark, Trump's core style hasn't really changed since he came into office, but now he will talk to the mainstream media, which he has called fake news. Do you think that this is a strategic shift on the part of the administration, or is it an indication of the way in which some of the news organizations have shifted their focus in order to retain the access to the president?
I think a lot of it is the pressure that's being put on by his adversary in Iran and by his approval ratings and higher gas prices. All that means that instead of taking a time out and figuring out, okay, what is our strategy? How do we actually open up the Strait of Hormuz? How do we actually get Iran to denuclearize and get its enriched uranium out of Iran? It's just more. And as Eric said, it's tiring to be part of that. But part of it is that is Trump's algorithm. He is faster than an algorithm, and it's different from any other presidency. When I was at the White House during the George W. Bush administration, we had an executive secretary that would go through and fact check every last item and every last fact sheet and press release. And before the president would go out and do a media interview, he had a briefing paper. There was a briefing session. There was maybe some Q&A. If it was something like a big major press conference or it was a very high-level interview, there'd be a question and answers in a murder board of sorts that you'd do. I don't think that exists very much. This is Trump's phone rings, Dozens of reporters reportedly around Washington, D.C. have his cell phone. And if they want an interview with the president, it's like playing Russian roulette. You dial the number, there's a chance he's going to pick up. And if he picks up, he's just going to start talking. So that's the difference with this presidency. And as the reporter who originally said, that's a good thing in some ways because it is transparent. And there are multiple opportunities for media to ask questions of this president. The difficulty is, as a person who has to interpret what he's saying or has to implement what he's saying, that's where the difficulty comes up because you're having whiplash trying to keep up with it all.
It's not just the content of the messaging as well, is it? It's the tone, the style of the language, isn't it? I mean, recently Donald Trump has been known to post the kind of language or statements that were previously we wouldn't have heard from a US president. I mean, it's even during negotiations to end the war with Iran, he continued to threaten not only their leadership, but also an entire civilization. Here are some experts we've got listed here. Open the expletive straight, you crazy expletive, or you're going to be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Donald J. Trump. That was on April the 5th. Just 2 days later, our whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. This is a point that you were you made previously, Mark, and I want to pick it up with Eric as well. There are consequences to language like this. We're seeing them now with the negotiations that are going back and forth. With regard to the ceasefire in Iran, how dangerous do you think that this could be?
Well, it's terribly dangerous because, again, we're talking about the president of the United States. And even though this president has operated very differently, certainly with beyond the norms and bounds of any other president in the United States does have the military capability to do exactly what Donald Trump is saying will happen. And when the media hears that, they respond, but they respond based on the credibility that, in fact, it will, because the United States certainly can do it. And because Donald Trump is someone who is unbound, there is a certain concern that, in fact, he will do that. And I think and it puts all of us, it puts people inside the White House on edge because now they have to respond to, in fact, how does the U.S. carry this out? Those of us who are reporters who are covering the White House. We are now pressed with trying to explain to our audiences what this means. How will the United States do this? What does this mean for the United States' credibility? And so it's more of a catch-all because it's not just the president speaking, but those words are now attached to everyone who is within this ecosystem, because we have a certain responsibility and our credibility is also on the line based on what the president is saying.
Mark, I want to talk to you about the kind of choreography that there is between the press and the administration, because what we see is obviously what we see on camera, and there's an adversarial, combative, often environment there. But we all know that there is a connection that extends beyond that. Can you just talk us through and you referred to it earlier on in terms of briefings and so on. You just talk to us about the kind of relationships there actually are between journalists and the administration.
So as people who cover the White House will tell you, it is very much a club. All the reporters talk to each other. The reporters have a lot of access to the White House press team, to the deputy spokespeople and those sort of people. So there's an ongoing conversation. But it's different when the president comes into the room, and that's when you know all the cameras are on, and that's your opportunities. We saw, kind of going back to the United States days of Sam Donaldson and Ronald Reagan, where they would have that back and forth, and that would be on the nightly news that night. Now this goes on a half a dozen or so times a day, and it's almost like a reporter has to get their question in and has to provoke him to get some answers from what's going on. But I think, as Eric said, the big challenge, and the word that hit me was credibility. You know, end of the day, when the president speaks, you want the enemies to hear the right thing. You want the American people to hear the right thing. You want your Gulf allies to hear the right thing. And during a crisis, you don't build trust, you spend trust. And that's the challenge that the president is having right now as he takes this language and it's more coarse and it's more harsh and it's more difficult to figure out how much further can it go. It's already at the highest DEFCON level there is.
We have about 1 minute left. Eric, I want to ask you, is this setting a precedent? Is this how it's going to be between subsequent administrations and the press now, do you think?
No, because I think if you look at Donald Trump from his first term to where he is now, and in between, of course, we had the Biden administration, and I was there in the White House, in that press room covering the White House, and it was a very different administration. And quite frankly, I think the difference was the lack of access that you had to someone like a President Biden, very different. And we know Donald Trump, while it can be good in terms of the amount of access that reporters have to him, of course, one of the drawbacks will be trying to not only check fact what he is saying, but also trying to keep up with what he will say, because what he will say to one reporter, he will say something completely different in like 10, 15 minutes. So I think trying to maintain all of that can be very difficult. But of course, the access is what we all love.
We're going to leave it there. Eric, thank you very much indeed. I want to thank my guest, Mark Firefly. He's a former Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications and Global Outreach at the White House, and Eric Ham, political analyst and former congressional staffer. And that's all from the team here in Washington. I'm going to hand you back now to Kimberly and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
Thanks, Rob. That's all from the White House and from Washington, D.C. On the next edition of This Is America, we'll look at how plans to reshape the U.S. voting system could ensure Republican dominance for years to come. Join us at 1830 GMT, that's 2:30 Eastern in the United States. Bye for now.